Let's see what we can do. Ketvach, we're learning as a schus for four shlema for Ilana Chaya Basarach. We're on the bottom of Kuf Zayin Amid Aleph. 3 lines further down. V'hadetnan. So continuing, analyzing the Mishnah on the previous block, right? We had said is really the at the beginning of the parak. One of the things we talked about the din of shoichet and mala, right? That we brought the parsha of someone bringing a carbon outside of the proper place, outside the azara. The first 7 sukkim talk about how someone who shechts a carbon outside of the azara is going to be chayiv karas. The last 2 psukim of the 9, so the first 7 is shchita, the last 9 is halah. The Mishnah says, what is halah? Halah includes burning the carbon, the emurim or the kaimitz on the mizbeach, or throwing the dam on the mizbeach. But all the other avodas, you're not going to be chayiv for doing them outside. So what the Gemara says, someone who, rather than doing the things that we described that you are chayiv for, he did other avodas. He separated the kaimitz of a mincha, or he's makabel the dam of a carbon, and he did that b'chutz potter. That is not going to be the chiyuv of doing it b'chutz. So Gemara minolan. Where do we know that from? So Gemara says, before we get to minolan, mehecha teisa the chayiv. Why would I think it's chayiv? You're saying, where do we know it's potter? How do we know why we think it's chayiv? The Torah discusses halah and it discusses shchita. Where does it discuss these other avodas? So Gemara, teisa mishchita. Let's learn out from shchita. You can't learn out from shchita. Mal shchita shchein nifsela shaloi lo eichel mepesach. On Pesach, if you shecht a carbon, not having in mind the chabura who are part of that Pesach, the shchita will passel it. So you see, it's a chumrah of shchita as opposed to the other avodas, as opposed to taking a kaimitz, or as opposed to kabbalah sadam. Teisim is zrika. If you'll say you learn it out from zrika, if you remember, we had a machlekes on the top of the yamid, or in the middle of the yamid, between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says we learn out from dam yechoshev, tells you that a zayrik dam is also chayiv, and Rabbi Akiva says oy zevach. That's what we learn out hazayrik. So let's learn out these other avodas from zrika. There's a din that a zar who does zrika of the carbon, which he's not allowed to do, he's chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, which the other avodas doesn't exist. So you can't learn it out from zrika. You can't learn it out from shchita. So why would I think that these other avodas are chayiv? Teisim b'beinei. Let's say you learn it out from Mitzad Shava, right? The shchita doesn't have the milas of zrika, and zrika doesn't have the milas of shchita. So you can learn out from the two of them. Zok the Gemara, no, it can't be that you're able to learn out these halachas from Mitzad Shava, because if that was the case, in came leyama bezrika. We had the machlekes about where we learn out zrika, but we wouldn't need to learn out zrika from a pasuk. We should learn it out from halah and shchita. Right? Was always say when you want to learn out zrika from halah and shchita, would have the same kasha like we said before, that shchita you can't learn it. You want to learn out from shchita, you can't learn out from shchita because it has a chumrah on Pesach that if you don't do it for the chabura, it's not going to be valid. Halah is shaykh by a mincha. Masha einkein zrika. There's no zrika by a mincha. You only there's no dam, so there's no zrika. So v'teisim b'beinei. So why can't you learn out from the two of them? La'achik ksiv kra. That's why we have the pasuk of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, whichever one it is. L'meimed l'yasa b'beinei. To tell you this rule that we don't make a tzara shava to learn the surim of being mala b'chutz or any of the like we're saying, we can't learn out zrika from shchita and halah because the pasuk told you a pasuk to tell you don't learn it out as a tzad shava. And that will tell you also, that's why we can't learn these other avodas, like doing the kmitza or the Kabbalah, from a tzara shava between shchita and zayrik, because you can't learn it out from a tzara shava. It's a strange thing. It's an interesting thing that we have such a defined limud to tell you that the din of tzara shava doesn't exist. You would think tzara shava is a rule, and it's a logical rule. You take two things and you use they see they don't share the same chumrah, so you should learn out from them. The Gemara is saying we could exclude, we could carve out certain dinim that are not learned from a tzara shava. Amar Avavo. Shachat. Okay, so now we're gonna just review for a second what we had quoted before from this machlokes of where do we know zrika is considered a zrika b'chutz is chayiv al talah. So we said before. So Rabbi Shmuel says it comes from dam yechoshev. Dam yechoshev is in pasuk dalad. It's part of the shchita. This iser. Rabbi Kiva says oy zevach, which is in pasuk ches, which is part of the halah part of the parsha. So it comes out machlokes where you learn it out from, Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Kiva. And one says you learn it out from the parsha. Rabbi Shmuel says you learn it out from the parsha of shchita, and Rabbi Kiva says you learn it out from the parsha of halah. Amar Avavo, shachat v'zarak. If you did both a shchita and a zrika b'chutz, l'divrei Rabbi Shmuel chayiv achas. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you only need chayiv one, because since zrika is learned out from the pasuk of shchita, they're all from the same pasuk. It's part of the same din, so you won't be chayiv twice. L'divrei Rabbi Kiva chayiv shtein. But according to Rabbi Kiva, that you learn it out from the later pasuk, the pasuk of halah, so it'll be two separate things. Abaye disagrees. I feel l'divrei Rabbi Kiva, even according to Rabbi Kiva, he only be chayiv one. Ein chayiv alachas. The Amakra sham tasa. The pasuk says, "There's the pasuk Kiyim b'makam ashiyivcha Hashem ba'achat shvatecha sham tala l'secha v'sham tasa kol Hashem anoichi mitzavcha." The pasuk in Dvarim that commands that you should do everything all the avodah should be done. Karbanos should be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So hakasav also nekula avodah achas. The Torah is making everything other than Sham Tala Isecha, anything other than Halah is only one Isser. It's a pasuk that's Xeris HaKasav. So even though according to Rabbi Shmuel, even according to Rabbi Kiva, that it's coming from that the din of Zrika is coming from Halah, so it shouldn't be separate from Shchita. But since the Torah said everything other than halah is all sham tasa, kasavasa kulan avaydachas, they're all treated as one. Zaruk v'hel l'divrei b'shmuel chayiv shtayim. And now in the next case is if you did a zrika and halah, then it's going to be exactly the opposite. L'divrei b'shmuel you chayiv two, because he says the pasuk of zrika is l'gabe shchita from Dam Yechoshev. L'divrei Akiva and chayiv alachas, because he says zevach, which is a pasuk by halah. Abaya mafilo divrei Rabbi Kiva chayiv shtayim. Even according to Rabbi Kiva, you're going to be chayiv two. Lahachi palginukra sham tala v'sham tasa. He dashes the pasuk. According to this, he dashes that pasuk differently. He say the pasuk sham tala. There you should bring it up. V'sham tasa. That the pasuk is telling you that they're treated as two separate things, even though zrika comes from halah. The Torah is telling you that anything other than halah is going to be treated separately. Zarak, Shachat, V'Zarak, V'Hel. If you did all three, L'divrei Hakol Chayiv Shtayim. If you did all three, is Shchita and Zrika and Halah, according to everyone, you're going to only be Chayiv two, because even according to Abaya, it's not going to make a difference, because if you go through the process of looking at all the Cheshbainis, either it's going to be, whether if you don't say like Abaya, so then you only could have Zrika is going to be part of Halah or part of Shchita. And according to Abaye, even according to the Manda Amar, who would say you only chayiv one, in this case you'd be chayiv two, because the Torah said that halah is going to be separate from everything else is going to be in one basket, and halah is in the one basket, and they're always going to be chayiv two. Zak Duma, Tan Rabban. I'm going to skip the parentheses, even though I know that some of it goes back in, but I find it just easier to read without it. Taraban. The michutz lamachna. The Torah says that you should do ish bebeis Yisrael sheyitzchat sharei kasav vayez b'machna or sheyishchat michutz lamachna. It does it in the machna or out of the machna. Both of these are outside of the Azara. Maybe I would think that it has to be outside of 3 machnas. The Torah says, Beis, ish beis Yisrael, sheyishchat sharei kasav vayez b'machna or sheyishchat michutz lamachna. Eiz b'machna. So the Torah is telling you if you do it in the machna, it doesn't have to be outside of all 3 machnas. But now it was saying b'machna is chayiv b'machna. Maybe that means even if he did it in the Beis Hamikdash, but he did it shchita outside of the proper place. An oil is supposed to be shechted in the Azara, but in the tzaf. And if he did it in the Dara, maybe that's also chayiv, because the Torah said chayiv even for shechting, for shchutei chutz, even b'machna. Tam and loimer, oi el michutz lamachna. Tam and loimer, oi. What is that? Ches? Sorry. It's a very a lot of problems with the language. Talmud Leimer, Oy asher yishchat, the shita changes. Asher yishchat michutz lamachna. That's the actual pasuk. Machutz lamachna miyuchat she'ein roy l'shchitas kachim l'shchitas kol zevach. Just like michutz lamachna, you can't shecht. There's no shchita of any kachim michutz lamachna. Yatsa darim she'afa pi she'ein roy l'shchitas kachim roy l'shchitas kachim. Since it is a place, the darim of the azara is a place where you do shecht, so it's not going to be excluded. Amr Ula, Hashoichet al Gaga shel Heichel Chayiv. Someone who shechts, it's not outside of the Beis Hamikdash at all. It's on the top of the Heichel. So it's in the Beis Hamikdash, but it's not in the Heichel of the Azara. Chayiv, it's still going to be Chayiv for Shchutei Chutz. Chayiv ein roy l'shchita kol zevach. Since you never shecht anything, right? We just learned the reason why we know Shchita's darim is not going to be considered Shchita's Chutz, because it has to be a place that's roy for some Shchita. But this is not roy l'shchita, so maybe it's considered shchutei chutz. Maskav l'rove im kei nichtav kra michutz lamachna v'loy boy al pesach oyel moed. Let it just say michutz lamachna and not say al pesach oyel moed. The Torah says al pesach oyel moed lo heviu lahakriv karban l'Hashem. This is in our parsha of shchutei chutz, and it says he didn't bring it to the pesach oyel moed. Al pesach oyel moed lamali. What is the reason for al pesach oyel moed? Lav lemutei gagoy. It's saying you have to bring it into the oil mayid, not on the roof. Let's just say El Pesach oil mayid ebamachna b'chutz lamachna lomali. What do you need b'machna and b'chutz lamachna? We'll just say El Pesach oil mayid that he has to bring it El Pesach oil mayid, and anything that's not in the oil mayid is possible. It's not complicated. Lav le'suya gaga is not to tell you even on the roof is also chayiv, because if you just said El Pesach Hayel Moed, that would include even on the roof. Amar of Mary lasuya kula b'fnim v'tzavara b'chutz. It's coming to tell you no. The reason why it says b'machna mechutz amachna, it's coming to tell you where the behema is in the azara, but its neck is outside, and he shechts it outside. What does the Torah care about that you're doing the shchita? The Torah says you can't shecht b'chutz, and he's doing the shchita b'chutz. Where does it help that the animal's body is in the azara? So the Gemara says, it's coming to tell you a different thing, where the entire animal is outside and its neck is inside the azara. That I might say that since he's doing the shchita b'fnim, it shouldn't be considered. He shouldn't be chayiv kares for shita b'chutz. Kamashvul, and that's what Torah says. Al pesach oyel moed. I'm sorry. The b'machna is not al pesach oyel moed. It's coming to b'machna. It's coming to tell you that it's still going to be chayiv if it's b'machna where the neck is inside and the body is outside. Itmar. Hamal bizman hazeh. Someone who brings a carbon bizman hazeh. Bizman hazeh is we no longer have the Beis Hamikdash, but there's no din of bamas currently. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan says he's chayiv for shritas chutz. Shlokish Amar poter. The Gemara is going to explain the reason. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chayiv kedusha rishon kitchel shayit kitchel hasud loved. He says the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash is still here. So when you do it mechutz to the Beis Hamikdash, you chayiv v'shchutei chutz. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash went away. So now, when you shecht outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it's not considered shchutei chutz. Name it the Pluktus Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua Kamiflagi. Let's say this machlekes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan is the same as the machlekes Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. The Tan, Rabbi Elazar. When they were building the Heichel, they were building the Beis Hamikdash for the first time. They would make klayim in the Heichel, so the people, the curtains that surrounded the Heichel were toward in the actual space of the Heichel, so the people who were working on the walls would be working from the outside. And they also made klayim ba'azaris. They made klayim around the yard, around the chutz. By the Heichel, they put the curtains on the inside, so the people working would be on the outside and they wouldn't see into the Heichel. But in the Azara, they put the klayim on the outside, they build on the inside, because there was no problem of Yisraelim coming in and working on the inside of the Azara. So you see from this, so that was what Rabbi Elazar said. That's what Rabbi Eliezer said. Amr Bishur. Bishur responded to him, Shemati shayu makrivin afal bishein bayis va'ichlin kachim afal bishein kloyim. Afal bishein kloyim, kachim ma'isasheni afal bishein chayma. They would be makriv karbanos even though there was the walls were not built, and they would eat kachim in the Azara even though there was no curtains around the Azara, and kachim kalam ma'isasheni would do even though there was no walls around the Beis Hamikdash. He says you don't need any walls, even though the walls were not built. We didn't. The Gemara seems to understand now. We didn't really need those curtains because you could bring the karbanis that were necessary to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash, and you could eat those things that needed to be in the Beis Hamikdash or in Yerushalayim. Because once something became kaddish, once the Beis Hamikdash was dedicated, it didn't need. This is talking about by Yesheni. You didn't need to have the curtains up in order to use the interior place. Who said you needed to have those curtains up because he holds it doesn't become kaddish until you put up something. No, not necessarily. Rabbi Eliezer also agrees that it remains kaddish. They were just saying the story of how it was. It wasn't that the curtains were necessary in order to do avodah, to eat inside of the curtains. He held it was kaddish anyway, and you could have eaten without the curtains. He's just saying how they did it, but he wasn't saying a din from it. So why did Rabbi Eliezer require that? Why did they need the curtains if he held kutcher rishon and kutcher lasud lovin? It was just for privacy. It wasn't strictly necessary.
So how can Rish Lakish argue on that? Rish Lakish was the Moira.
You're saying who would be the man da'am? No, because he would not analyze the Mishnah like that. I guess the problem is, according to Rish Lakish, l'chayra would come out as a machlokes tanoim. He would have to say l'chayra it's a machlokes between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan how to understand this machlokes Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. Rish Lakish will say it's a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, they both agree with me. Yeah. Itma. Hamala, someone who's mala a piece of a carbon to be burnt on the mizbeach b'chutz, ve'ein by kazayis, but it's not a kazayis, ve'etzem mashlim kazayis. But you have a bone that's attached. The bone does not have to be burnt on the mizbeach, but there's a bone attached to it that could be burnt along with it. It makes it into a kazayis. V'yechan amar chayiv. V'yechan says chayiv. Rish Lakish amar potter. Rish Lakish says you don't count the bone to make it a kazayis. V'yechan amar chayiv. Chibure oilin ka'oilin dami. That which is attached, something that's going up, is part of what's going up. Shkash amar potter. Chibure oilin lav ka'oilin dami. That's their shittus. Boy Rava. Hamale roish ben yoina. She'ein by kazayis. If someone brings a ben yaina, which is a small bird, and it's supposed to be it's an oila, so it's supposed to be burnt, and he brings it by chutz. She'ein by kazayis, it doesn't have a kazayis. Umelach mashlim el kazayis, but you have to, everything that's brought on the mizbeach has to have salt on it. That's why we put salt on our bread as a zecher to what we used to do in the Beis Hamikdash. So the only way this got to kazayis was with that salt that you add. Mal. Amle Ravan b'par zakaya l'Ravashi lavan b'kleider of Yechon Reish Lakish. Isn't this the same as the machlekes we had l'gabi the bone? The bone also doesn't have to be brought, but it was Rabbi Yechon said Yechayev. It's treated as part of the halah, and you have a kazayis. And Rabbi Yechon said you're not. So wouldn't this be the same thing? So no. Tibayla Rabbi Yechon and Tibayla Reish Lakish. It's still a question. Rabbi Yochanan might say the din is different about the salt, and that he would say it's potter, even though he says chayiv by the bone, he would say it's potter by the salt. By Reish Lakish, even though he says that the bone is potter, maybe he'll say that the salt is chayiv. Tibayla Rabbi Yochanan, ad kan lekam Rabbi Yochanan hasam, that which Rabbi Yochanan said you chayiv by the bone, el etzem, diminad the baser, it's part of the baser. It's the same thing. So therefore you count it all as one kazais. Aval melach the lav mina de bar yoinahu, loy tibayim. But the melach, which is a totally separate thing, it would not be included to add up to kazayis to be mechayiv you for being malabachutz. To buy Reish Lakish, and you could also ask according to Reish Lakish, at kan lekam Reish Lakish hasam eladi parish mina lav mitzvah asuke. By the bone, if he said you potter, because if you took away the bone, there's no mitzvah to bring up the bone. Once it's separated, there's no requirement to bring it up. Aval hacha di parish mitzvah asuke, loy. But by salt, you're required to have salt on the head of the yaina. So if you took off the salt, you'd have to put other salt on it. Or maybe there's no chilik teku. So it's taka a teku.
Salt is deraisa?
I think so. I think the Torah says that you should do a melech. Yeah, I think it's in Vayikra, like real toward the beginning. It's a Gemara. I think I saw. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw Gemaras that quoted from the pasuk. Okay, well, back to our Mishnah. But Machlekes, between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and right, that we had a question. Right at the beginning of the Mishnah, we talked about if someone shechs and is mala bachutz, the Tanakama says, it wasn't Rebbe Lazar, it was the Tanakama. Tanakama says yechayev for both of them, even though he did the shchita of this carbon bachutz, he could also be chayev for bringing it for being mala bachutz. The Zagili says no, it's only chayev if he was shachat befnim and he was mala bachutz, but if he's shachat b'chutz, he can't be a mechayiv for being mala b'chutz. And the Chum said, "What do you mean? How could that be?" Because he said, if once it was shechted b'chutz, then it's puzzle. So when he's being mala, is not chayiv. The Chum said back to him, "What are you saying? Anytime, even if you shecht it b'fnim, but then you have to take it outside in order to be malit b'chutz. So as soon as you take it outside, you passel it anyway. So what difference does it make if you passeled it by shechting it b'fnim, or you passeled it shechting it b'chutz? In either case, you're never going to have a halah b'chutz without taking it outside. Then the basa becomes passel along the way. So in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi did not respond to this, but our Gemara is going to stand up for Rabbi Yossi. Heishiv Rabbi tachas Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi answered on behalf of Rabbi Yossi. Mal shoichet b'fnim u'mal b'chutz. He He says you can't compare the two things. Although it's true that when you bring out the basar after the shechita b'fnim, it's going to become pasul, but it had a shasa kosher while it was b'fnim, it was kosher. But if you shechta b'chutz, then it's totally pasul from the beginning, so that you're not going to be chayav for being malad. That was his teretz. Heisher b'lozer bar Shimon, tachas Rabbi Yisrael Galil. Mal shechem b'fnim, mal b'chutz shechayin kodesh mekablei. That when you shecht b'fnim and then you are malad b'chutz, when you shecht something b'fnim, even if you bring it out, if you bring it back into the Beis Hamikdash and put it on the mizbeach, we're going to have the din im Allah yardu. Like we learned before, anything that's psula is bakaidish, the din is im Allah yardu. So if you shecht it b'fnim, it's going to have a din im Allah yardu. But if you shecht it b'chutz, ain't kodesh mekablei, then there's no din. If you shecht it b'chutz, then it's psul is not psul is not bakaidish, so it doesn't have a din im Allah yardu. So then it wouldn't. That he wouldn't be chayiv for shchitas b'chutz. So come on, my beinayu. What's the difference between them? Amaziri shchitas laila ika beinayu. The difference will be if you shechted it by night. The gabe shchitas laila. The din is that it's still considered. It's still considered that it's imal lo yardu, but it's not going to have a din of what do you call it? That it's not going to have a shasa kosher. As soon as you shecht it, it's pasul. Rabba Amar Kabbalah b'kli chaylik abeinayu. So a similar nafkamina would be if they're makabel instead of makabel in a kli sharas, he's makabel in a kli chol. So the dam, then he's zayrik the dam. So that also, if you say the question is when it had a shasa kosher, this was possible as soon as it went into the kli. But as far as im Allah yardu would be have a din of Allah yardu, so you should be able to be chayiv for shchitas chutz on it or for big malet b'chutz. Then the Mishnah continued and said a similar discussion, a very analogous discussion between Rebbe Lazar, Rabbi Yisrael Galili, and the Tanakama. The Gabi Tamish Achal ben Kodesh, right? If someone there's a din that someone who is Tameh, who eats kachim, is chayiv karis. Someone who eats basar of kachim when he's tar, but the basar is basar kachim that became tamei, he's not allowed to do it, but it's not chayiv karas. So the question is, the Chacham say, if you eat someone who is himself has tumas haguf, and he eats basar of kachim that's also tamei, he's not going to be mechayiv. I'm sorry, he will be chayiv for the for chatas for the tumas haguf, even though the tumas the food itself, the basar of the carbon is tamei. It doesn't make a difference. He could still be mechayiv the chatas because of the kedushas haguf. Gili says no, it's only a tamei that eats something the basar that's tar. But if the basar is tamei, the carbon of the basar is tamei, because he only ate something that's a davar tamei, so it's not able to also become a kedushas haguf and be mechayiv katas. So Gemara, so Chacham said, no, what do you mean? As soon as he touches the basar to put it in his mouth, like we saw the Taisus before, that everyone always touches the basar when they eat it, so it's going to be metamed anyway. Every person who's tumas haguf is going to make the kachim tamei when he touches it. So Gemara, Shapi Kamalei Rabbanon Rabbi Yisrael Galili, Amarava, Kol Heicha de Nitma tumas haguf, Achach Nitma basar, Du Kol Amalei Pligi de Chayiv. Rav explains that everyone agrees that if the tumas haguf, the person eating the basar, he became tamei, and then afterwards the basar became tamei. Everyone will agree that it's going to be chayiv. Shechei tumas haguf b'karas, because tumas haguf is a karas, and you're going to certainly be chayiv because that tumah took effect before the tumas basar came. Keep the shenid basar v'achan nidus haguf. The question is whether you can say this is an Isser Koil. That means that an Isser Koil can be Chal on another Isser, an Isser that's going to include something else. So since this is Chayiv Karis, it's a more extensive, the Chayiv of Kedushas Haguf, Tumas Haguf excludes other pieces of basar that are not tamei, so it will also include It will also include, you say in Migu, that Isser Kol can be Chal and Isser. But the Rabbi Yossi Aglili disagrees. He says you're not going to say Migu, you're not going to say, um, generally the rule is that when something is also, we don't say Ench Isser Chal Isser. So if the Basar became Tameh before he became a Tameh Tumas Aguf, it's not going to be Nichlal onto the, you're not going to say that you're going to say Isser is Chal on Isser because it's an Isser Kol. Right? Since it was already also to him, this boss was already, it's going to say in Isser Chal Isser, we're not going to care about the fact that he became a guf tamei afterwards. For example, Rabbi Yossi, he demigile amina and teisi michatas tumas aguf the chamira the tachal al tumas basar. He says even though you don't say it's correct Gemara, even though Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that his tumas aguf can't be chal on legabe Torah foods. No, sorry. He's saying you can't say that just because it's chal legabe Torah foods, something that's Torah won't also apply to something that's tameh. But why don't we say that since tumas haguf is chamor, then it's not a tumas. It's not the same isser. It's a bigger isser in that tumas haguf, like we said, it brings with it chatas, it brings with it karas. Masha'enke the tumas. The tumah of the basar is less. Amar Rashi, no. Mimai tumas aguf chamura, tumas basar chamura. Maybe tumas, but in some ways tumas basar is chamur. Shechein le'tayra b'mikvah. A person who becomes tamei, tumas aguf, he can go be the mitayra in the mikvah, and then he could eat basar for whenever he wants. But shechein basar that became tamei, there's no cure for it, and it remains puzzle, it remains tamei forever. Zok the Mishnah. You're okay with going weiter a little bit?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm
Okay, good.
perfectly fine.
Great. Because we have 1 week left, and I'm getting nervous. Zok the Mishnah. Chayme b'shchita me ba'aliyah or ba'aliyah me b'shchita. Like we said, there are two concepts that we talked about in the previous Mishnah. There's shchitas carbon b'chutz, and there's halah carbon b'chutz. You shech the carbon b'chutz, and you could also bring the carbon, which, like we said, means burning the basar for avanaylo or being zayrik the dam, and vice versa. There's a chumrah of the aliyah over the shchita. Chayra b'shchita shashayich lahedjit chay. There's a chayra of shchita that someone who shechts and he has in mind that he wants to use it not for a carbon. He takes the carbon, he brings it outside, but he shechts it just to make a barbecue. He's not doing it as a carbon. He's still going to be chayiv. But if someone takes a carbon and he burns it on the mizbeach, or he zayrik the dam, but he's not having in mind for the Rebbeinu Shalom, he's having in mind he's having in mind for who knows what, like he's basically for avodah zarah. He's going to be potter for Haitzah's chutz. They ask, if he's being Avodah avodah zarah, what do we care that he's potter from shchutei chutz? He's still going to get karos, and they have to bring chatas for the avodah zarah. I'm not sure what the kasha is because we're talking about over here. Maybe it could be bring 2 chatas. In any case, but amal lahedjit is potter as opposed to shchita. Chaymer Bali, and the Chaymer of Halah is Shnaim she'achzu b'sak and v'shachtu p'turim. If 2 people collaborate to do a shchita b'chutz, they're going to be potter. Achzu b'ever v'helu chayavim. But if 2 people grab onto an aver and they're malit on the mizbeach, they're going to be chayiv even though they did it together. Each one will be chayiv v'chatas. Then we say another din. Hela v'chaza v'hela v'chaza v'hela chayiv al kol aliyah. If you keep on bring one, they bring one thing, then they bring another, and they bring another. The chayiv for each one, Rashi says in different halamas, if they forgot in between. Divrei Reb Shimon, that's Reb Shimon's seat. The Yossi says you only chayiv one for all of them. The Ein Chayiv, and the Gemara is going to explain what exactly the Machlekes says. Ein Chayiv at Sheyal l'Rosh HaMizbech. The only Chayiv for being Mala on an actual Mizbech. If they're bringing it bachutz, it has to be on something that's dedicated as a Mizbech. Even if you do it on a rock or a stone, it's chayiv. It doesn't have to be bedafka on a mizbech. As long as he offers it up and he burns it or he throws it, you chayiv.
Mizbeach meaning on a bomber or Mizbeach?
Well, that's going to be the question. The question is, um, um, it's going to depend on whether it's considered a bama. What's considered a bama? The Torah says what you need to have to be a bama. But let's leave that for when we see the Gemara. It's saying if you the Machlekes Rabbi Yossi says it has to be some form of a mizbeach that you're bringing it on. A bama, we're talking about b'shas that iser habamas, right? We're talking about during a time when you can't bring on a bama. So he has to bring on something that would be a bama. And Rav Shimon says no, it doesn't have to be on a bama. It could be on anything, anything that he offers it up on, as long as he's doing it l'shem that he's trying to bring it as a carbon, he's going to be chayiv for doing it b'chutz. But we're going back to the first in. We said that if you do halah lahedjit, you're potter, and if you do shchita lahedjit, you're chayiv. Why is it that mala lahedjit is potter d'chsev lashem? Because it says lashem, it has to be lashem and not lahedjit. In fact, the b'shchita nami yaksev lashem, it says lashem by shchita as well. So Gemara shani also damakra ish ish. It says by shchita ish ish. It has to be. Even though it says Lashem, it says Ish Ish. That tells you that if he does it to a man as well, he's going to be Chayiv by Shchita. What?
What does it mean to a man? Does it to a man?
Lahedjit, as opposed to doing it Lashem.
Oh, okay.
That's what, right. That's what we machalik. That Shchita done Lahedjit is Chayiv. He's intending to use it for himself. He wants to make a barbecue. So that should also, we have the same ishish legabe halah. So no, the ishish that it says by Allah, the ishish is telling you a whole different thing. The second in that we said, the chumrah of halah, that we said if you two people hold on to an aver, it says ishish, a lashon of two people, that two people who bring an aver are chayav. So nami. It says over here also, why don't we say the same thing over here? Means it should tell us, even though it's not the din, it should come to tell us, fakert from we said in the Mishnah, that two people who shecht are potter, let it say that two people who shecht are chayiv. So Gemara shani hasam damakra hahu echad v'lo shnayim. By shchita it says ha'ish hahu, only that person, but not a second person. So Gemara yachinam gabi halon nami yaksev hahu. All these psukim we keep on bringing in both parshias. So it says hahu by halah. So then hahu should tell you also echad v'lo shnayim. If two people are mala and aver together, they should be potter. But no, we needed to exclude if it was done b'shaygig or I'm sorry, not b'tumah. Shaygig einus umuta. If he thought that it was mutter, or someone convinced him it was mutter, or if he did it b'einus that he mamash had he was forced into doing it, that they're not going to be chayiv achatas.
We're talking about here by halal?
Yeah. Has to be that he did it b'shaygig, a different kind of shaygig. Not these shkaygim of he didn't realize what he was doing. It can't be that he thought it was mutter, or that someone told him it was mutter. It has to be, these are all Eimer mutters. These are, or Einis, it's like versions of things that are not considered shaygig.
Mm-hmm.
Einis, right? Someone's forced is not a shaygig. He doesn't bring a chatas if he's forced. Similarly, if someone believed something was mutter, or he was told that it was mutter, which is another variation. I think it's mutter. That's not a shaygig, and he's not gonna bring a chatas for that.
But what's the difference? If it's a shogeg oinus, it should apply in any mitzvah. I mean, it shouldn't be
Yeah.
chayav. What's the difference?
What do you mean?
I
We,
mean, if
these
you're
are you're
oinus
saying
and you eating a challah because you're oinus, okay, you shouldn't be chayav. It's an
right,
oinus.
so that's what Taisus asked this. Shaygig eines umuta. Ksas kasha honest lomali kra. Pshita eines rachmana patri. We know
Right.
that eines is pater. Why do we need a
Right.
special pasuk here? The Shema high honest prat lo oimer mutter. Saying honest to exclude oimer mutter. V'tema lomali kra lemifter mikaris kshu shaygig pshita bar karbonu. What do we have to tell him? He's potter from karas when he's a shaygig. He gets carbon. So Taisus is saying that when we say he's excluded when he's a shaygig, it means he's excluded from karas, and therefore he brings the carbon. Yishlem is hagadai dechamina iloi maisi carbon lahavi b'karis lalacha avos carbon davka ksiv b'nislach. Maybe you would have thought the psukim over here are mashma that if he doesn't bring a carbon, he'll get a karis because he only gets. If he doesn't bring the chatas, he's going to get karis because it says over here he'll bring the carbon and v'nislach. Okay, but you're on the right track of asking your question. Taisus did not say pshat the way I described it. Taisus is saying that all these things, einis, shaygig, all these things are to exclude, to say that you don't get karas, that you have to bring a chatas. I was saying Rashi's pshat. But Taisus asked you a question, what do you have to say einis? That was the reason
Right.
why I brought Taisus. Rashi's pshat is that we're talking about things that you should, I think, that you don't, it doesn't include chatas either. Okay.
That doesn't include how meaning, but this is chatas. If he does these things alone or b'shoigek, he's chayav chatas.
Well, I'm understanding it from Rashi. That Rashi is understanding these are kind of things that he doesn't even bring a chatas for. Just like Einis, right? Einis doesn't bring a chatas.
Right.
So the shaygig and the mutah, I think, is also similarly not even chayav chatas. It's talking about specifically someone who isn't oimer mutter, not like Taisa said. He's saying Einus is as opposed to Eimer Mutter. I think these are Eimer Mutters that a person doesn't have to bring a Chatas. That's the way I understood it. So Gemara, if that's the case, but Legabe Shchita also, it says Ha'ish. Let's say that it's coming to exclude if he did it with any of these ways. So how can you say how who is coming to like we said to tell you that you're chayiv only if one person did it and not two? So Treya hu ksivi. It says hahu twice in the Parsha of Shchita. So one is to tell you Einus Sheiga Einus Mutar is excluded, and the second one is to tell you only if one person did the Shchita, not if two. Ve'el Lashem Lamali. Zak the Gemara. What do we need the pasuk of Lashem legabe shchita? Once we're saying that if you do it lahedjit, you're going to be chayiv. So we had said Lashem, which it says by Allah tells you you're not. But he said, what about the Lashem that it says by shchita? Lahaitzi sar hamishtalech. Let's come and tell you a totally different din, that there's no din if a sar mishtalech is not supposed to be geshachten. There's no shchita on the sar Lazazel on Yom Kippur. If someone went ahead and shechted that he's not going to b'chutz, he's not going to be chayiv. It has to be something that's intended for shchita. So have to go
Chayav chatas?
no, sar hamishtalech. It's a
Right.
specific. It's not a carbon at all. It gets thrown
Right.
off the cliff. So someone
Right.
decided I'm going to shecht it b'chutz. The Torah is telling you Lashem only something that was supposed to be a carbon, not the sar hamishtalech. If you shecht it b'chutz, you're not going to be chayiv. Even though normally shechting a carbon yechayev, this sar mishtalech is an exception.
Oh, okay.
Totally different thing. Nothing to do with what we said before. You know what? I'm going to stop over here, even though I would like to go on, but it's my brain is getting too fuzzy. Maybe might have to suffer tomorrow and go extra, but I can only do what I could do. Okay.
Feel
Have a
better.
good Tvach.
Like a 12 square.